I'm Vicky Linnane and welcome to Embrace Therapy podcast. I am a practicing art therapist based in Ireland. In each episode, I will interview guests from various fields of therapy and well-being with the aim to encourage healing through embracing therapy.
On today's podcast, I speak with Dramatherapist Monica Phinney. She speaks to us all the way from Kansas City, Missouri in the United States. She tells us all about her work, offering wellness workshops to encourage overall wellness, using the arts, visual art, drama movement, writing and music to help those find healthier relationships with themselves and others, and just to build some more resilience. She specialises in using theatre and roleplay alongside other expressive arts to achieve therapeutic and educational goals. And we discuss a very exciting new prospect in her career, where she works on film sets. And we discuss the latest film, Procession, where she helps 6 men who have gone through a lot of trauma in their lives. So this is no easy listen, although we don't give too much of the movie away. However, just wanted to say that if you have any sensitivity in this area, we will be talking about clerical abuse, because the film Procession does deal with this in a very direct way, but it also is in a very empowering way. It gave the 6 men who have survived this abuse some control over their story and gave the power back to them. Gave options to change it in some way, giving a sense of autonomy for each of them as they explored and dramatised their stories. And as Monica defines dramatherapy, it's the intentional use of dramatic theatre, role-play techniques for a therapeutic goal. And in this film, which was directed by Robert Greene, the 6 men produced their own short films reflecting on their abuse, with the goal of reclaiming those memories and offering protection to their inner children. This is a film that I think needs to be really amplified across the world. It really shows the power behind creative arts therapies and the process of, reframing our experiences. I think, I really want to stand behind this and promote the work that has been done by Robert Greene, Monica Phinney, and all the cast involved. So just to say that where I work in Soearth Projects with Heidi Morrison, we will be hosting a screening of Procession and a live panel discussion with Robert Greene, Mike Foreman and Monica Phinney. And after that, we will be giving some time for a debrief with the opportunity to join in with Circle Playback Theatre Company, playing back the stories and experiences to help with the process. So you can log in from anywhere in the world. Tickets are available on Eventbrite and on the Soearth Projects website. And you can also come in person. We have tickets available for in-house as well. And we really would look forward to seeing you there in person. So without further ado, I introduce to you today Monica Phinney, dramatherapist from Kansas City. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Oh, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so terrible at this converting time thing.
I should have looked sooner. I was like, I'm sure it is fine, and so I'll check when I get home. And then I was like, oh no, 3 minutes.
Well, sorry about
I should
that.
have checked yesterday. That would have made more sense. But I'm
No,
here. I'm
thank
sorry I'm
you.
late.
Not at all. I'm like, an hour early technically, Gosh, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's like I may have dyslexia because I'm finding that time and like counting and all that kind of thing, I'm like not good at.
I do have ADHD, so we can blame that if you
Yeah.
like.
There's two of us in it. Okay, cool.
There we go.
So you're in Kansas City.
Yes, Kansas City, Missouri.
I looked it up. It's 11 hours direct flight from here.
My goodness.
You were far, far away.
Yes.
Yeah? Gosh. Have you ever been over to Europe before?
I haven't, which is
Ooh.
wild. I really need to do that soon.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it won't happen this summer. We've got a cruise that will be in the Bahamas for a big chunk and a lot of time in Florida too. So hopefully
Nice.
next time there's a school break, we'll make it to Europe this time.
Yeah, gosh, that sounds very exciting. I've never been to that side of the world like the Bahamas, but gosh, that sounds amazing and well deserved. I'm sure you've been very, very, very busy.
Yes. It's been a busy year.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you been to the States before?
I have. I went to New York twice and I was in San Francisco on what we call a J1, which is like a visa to go over to work.
Oh,
But I decided not to work and have lots of fun. So
great.
I was
For
on a
you.
3-month holiday and lived on like maybe like $5 a day or something ridiculous. But
Oh, fun. I love San Francisco. That would be a lot of fun.
yeah. So Monica, you're a drama therapist and you studied in Kansas State University, is that right?
I did.
Yeah. And are you I suppose since then, are you going out on your own or like, because I have like heard about Heartwork Studios. Is that like completely your own thing?
That is my own thing, and
Ooh.
it's relatively small. Uh, Hard work was always sort of the goal for me. After I graduated from Kansas State, my focus as while I was there was primarily on intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Mm.
And when I moved to Kansas City, which was only actually a couple of hours away, so I was very fortunate to find a drama therapy program near where I wanted to be because there aren't very many.
No.
Around here, if you want to get one in America, you need to be on either coast or at Kansas State. So I got very fortunate to be close to Kansas State. Um, After I moved to Kansas City, I realized that I didn't really have a heart for clinical therapy, and that ultimately what I would like to do was to be on the wellness side of things and something that I felt like was a little bit more accessible. The culture in Midwestern United States tends to have some stigma surrounding therapy as well. And so I wanted to bring something that felt more accessible from that mindset, as well as just being more accessible and more affordable. Um, I also knew that I wanted to try to incorporate all of the arts as much as possible. And that was always the way that I did things when I was in school. So the goal has always been that eventually I would combine all the art forms and be more in the wellness space and be able to offer workshops to the general public from people who wouldn't necessarily seek out therapy per se.
Uh-huh.
So that is what Heartwork is for. We do primarily group workshops. I will occasionally take on a client for what sort of resembles life coaching. I call it creative wellness coaching. And so if I have an individual instead of a group, it is not therapeutic. It's more coaching in nature. You could call it therapeutic, but it's not therapy. um,
Yeah.
but teaching people to tap into creativity and different art forms and activities that they could use at home for certain goals that they have for their life.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. What a lovely marriage. Like that's just so lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, kind of similar, I guess. I went down the route of going into creative arts facilitation. So, yeah, and I did like a postgraduate certificate in that, but it was in a clinical setting, like
Right.
definitely like hospital setting.
Right.
yeah, like after a couple of years of just being in institutions, I felt, yeah, it's just not for me. Yeah.
I
So,
spent,
yeah.
I think under 2 years in an institution, inpatient psychiatric. I Here they called our job title was expressive therapist,
Okay.
although it's interesting because expressive therapy is its own field, and you need to be trained in all of the art forms and ways to merge all the art forms in order to really be an expressive therapist. So it was an interesting choice of job title on their part, but I was only practicing within my realm. So I would go in and do the drama therapy, and then there were other people on my team who would go in and do art therapy and music therapy. And I just learned that inpatient psych wasn't for me. So it was a learning experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and since then I was just certain that I just wanted to try something a little bit different.
Yeah, I really like the idea of being in the community though. Do you know, like, and this like getting people in and getting them on the road to wellness, like, and
Mhm.
giving them tools that they can use at home. So like I think
Absolutely.
that's really gorgeous work, you know. And
Thank you.
similarly to what you were saying about Kansas City, like Ireland, you know, we're not a huge population, like about 5 million,
Mhm.
but you know, there still is a stigma, you know. Like I know that like the people I surround myself with, like they may have some experience of going to therapy, but
Right.
if I step out of that friend circle, like, yeah, not many, you
True.
know. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's quite similar in a way.
It does sound similar.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, you know, the thing that I'm just dying to ask you about, I suppose we'll just jump in. It's just incredible. And I think, you know, it's a really unique opportunity that you had. So
Mhm.
you were invited into doing a biographical documentary called Procession, and to be part of this, I suppose, dramatization of six men's stories of clerical abuse, and to be the facilitator of this uh, journey of them unraveling their trauma and you helping them give it shape in a safe, like contained way that drama therapy does. But I've watched it twice now and I can't stop crying from beginning to end. Like it's a real visceral, like my gut, everything was just like, ugh, fired up. Like,
That's very
yeah. So how did it come
okay.
about? Is I guess,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there was like an interesting converging of perfect events that allowed this movie to be made. Um, been working in documentary film for probably 15 years or so. This is his seventh feature film. And if you go back and look at the films that he's done in the past, he has always had a fascination with the blurred lines between fiction and reality, and the nature of people putting on a role and performing for the world, and concepts like that we are very familiar with in drama therapy. So he's interested in that and in the roles that people play in the world and reality and how we're performing, and a lot of things that are very interesting to drama therapists. So in many ways, I feel that Procession is sort of a culmination of all of the things that Robert has been trying to do throughout his career. And I don't mean to say trying because his other movies were very good too. This is sort of just like the pinnacle of what was important to him, I think, of what fascinates him. And so the last movie that he made prior to Procession is called Bisbee 17. And in Bisbee 17, they reenacted an event from 100 years prior in a town where there was a forced deportation in 1917 of mining workers who were on strike. And they went back to the same town where a lot of people are the descendants of either the miners or the people who deported them, and reenacted this historic event using real people instead of actors. And that was very powerful and for a lot of people very cathartic because of the generational trauma and because of these things that, are still very real, honestly, politically. And so there was some point in that movie where someone actually said, this is a giant group therapy session. And that was actually like, that made it to screen. And so later, when I ended up being offered this job, I went back and watched Robert's movies. And when I got to that point in that movie, I said, okay, I understand now why I'm here. Essentially, what happened with Bisbee is that it saw quite a bit of success. I think that one might have premiered at Sundance or went to Sundance. And as he was doing talkback sessions for Bisbee, people actually started asking him whether he had a therapist on set because of that comment. And in his words, his responses were inadequate. He didn't really know exactly why he didn't have a therapist, but he didn't feel it was necessary because what they were doing wasn't therapy. But he went into a bit of a career crisis and wasn't sure why make movies anymore unless you have a purpose, a bigger purpose, and that you are helping people in the process. And he said many times that he's not sure he agrees with those that documentaries can change the world, but he knows for a fact that documentaries change the lives of the people who are involved in them. Totally. And after 15 years of working with people like that and actually forging really close relationships, often with subjects, he knew that to be true. So he was in this interesting space where he didn't want to do this work anymore unless it was wildly different and it came from a different approach. Around the same time, I realized I didn't really want to do official drama therapy anymore, and that I wanted to work in a more therapeutic or wellness space. And I just started exploring opening Heartwork. And I was also chairing the North American Dramatherapy Association conference that year, which happened to be in Kansas City for the first time ever. This was in 2018. And all of these things happened at once. Robert actually caught that press conference that opens Procession on television and was really moved by it. And one of the things he was very moved by is that he often, when he hears these stories, especially impacting children, he will turn off the television because it's just not something as a parent that he was able to handle. And he sort of sat with that information and thought, this is a reason why I need to confront it, and we all need to confront it. And he was really, enthralled by the men that were in that press conference specifically, and they're fascinating people. They're amazing, and three of those men that were in the press conference made it to the film. So he began talking first to the lawyer in the movie, Rebecca, and she represented all of the men who took part. He went through her, and it was up to her to cast this and find the people who not only could handle this sort of thing because they have, in most cases, all except for Ed's case, had been in the public eye already with this information, but also who could benefit the most from it because they didn't feel they had actually been heard. For some reason or another, everyone had felt that everyone who took part in this film felt that justice hadn't been served for them, that their story hadn't been heard the way they were trying to tell it, and their experiences just, were falling on deaf ears to the powers that be. So that's sort of how she reached that decision. Robert found out that conference was in Kansas City shortly after deciding that he really hoped to work with those men. He still hadn't approached Rebecca. And Robert actually lives in the same state. He lives in Columbia, Missouri. He runs a program at a university there, a documentary journalism program, but his crew all lives in New York. And so it all was very kismet. He only had to travel under 2 hours to come to that conference and learn about dramatherapy. He had read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk and realized after reading that book, this is the connection that I was looking for to make purposeful films now. And dramatherapy is what I've maybe been doing this entire time without realizing there was a word for it. He tells people I was doing unlicensed dramatherapy. It was like, we don't actually have a license either here. But it really spoke to him because there were mentions of psychodrama in that book and the ways in which trauma lives in the body and can be helped by things like this. So he showed up at that conference that I was chairing. I didn't meet him at that conference. I didn't even know he was there. I was so busy, but he did sit in a room full of very prominent drama therapists who specialize in trauma. And they told him all of the things that could work about his idea and all of the things that couldn't. And most of them were things that couldn't because he had a very preliminary idea of what he could do at that time. He thought perhaps we could have drama therapy sessions with these men and film them and turn that into something. And they said, well, there's a conflict there because you're making a product and therapy is not about that. And if they're experiencing therapy, we can't have these outside influences getting in the way of their therapeutic outcomes. And so he really took all of that information to heart and ran with it and ended up coming in with exactly the right mindset, which is that something Rebecca had told him that, as re-traumatization is about continuing to take the power away. And if you are returning the power, you're never going to be re-traumatizing. And so if everything is in their hands, that's far less of a concern. And he got to me just through the grapevine. He went from one person to another and just tried to see who it's hard to explain other than using the word vibes. We vibed. I feel like we had similar goals. We viewed therapy in the same light. We viewed filmmaking in the same light. I have felt for many years that I wanted to see drama therapists employed on film sets, primarily fictional film sets, in order to de-role actors. And I didn't expect I would be the one to enter that field, but it's something that I've been saying for years needed to happen. So it's very odd to have this fall in my lap. But we had very similar outlooks on the overall goal being to start the conversation between fields and share knowledge between fields so that places, settings like filmmaking and maybe specifically documentary filmmaking, but not necessarily, can become these spaces that understand some of the tenets of the creative arts therapies and can make those spaces safer. Not necessarily that there has to be a drama therapist on every film set, although that's a bit my goal, but that there are pieces of our world that are shared with them that can be used in a therapeutic, not therapy way to make some of these spaces as safe as they can be and honestly have benefits as well to those participating. I was trying to have this balance between feeling as though I was a safety net or there to keep people on the rails, or whether I was there to provoke new directions and make this, something more profound, more healing. And because I was there, we were able to do that. But in a lot of in a lot of cases, you would have to be careful treading the line between doing something that people perceive as therapy with people who are not trained.
That is just amazing. What serendipity, like just to kind of fall into it in a really organic way, you kind of wanting this and him kind of needing it, and oh gosh, that's so beautiful. But yeah, I remember in one particular part, Mike Foreman, and that scene in particular where, you could see you kind of giving him a little bit more direction. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, like, I suppose there's a scene with a little boy and a cake, and not to say anything else, but just that even the idea of Mike taking the cake and smashing it on the table was like, whoa, it was just this amazing, because he was so angry. He's probably one of the most angry, well, outwardly angry person, but even that scene where like the lights are kind of flickering and it's quite scary, the music and the scene just having these people that were really important to his case, you know, this kind of review was just so amazing. I think that one really stood out for me because you could kind of see how you can direct it to give it a different ending for growth and change to occur. You know, that transformation that we kind of get in the drama therapy room or in the creative arts therapy room, but you got it on set and it was just incredible to see. I got really emotional with that part. I really did. But
Very powerful.
yeah. And like, you know, that's one thing that we got to see, but I imagine, and from what you're saying, I imagine there's like lots that we didn't see for good reason. You know, like you said, the process, you know, it couldn't be telling everything, you know. So it was really, really important to those 6 men that they got to share what they wanted to. And yeah, I think that was great. But when you were in it and with them every day, I imagine on set, you know, like how did you find the process of them telling their truth through their story, like really authentically, and then trying to get them to de-roll, like you said? Like, how did you find that process? Because, you know, some of them, like even like Tom Viviano, I think is how you say his name.
Oh,
Um,
Viviano. Yeah.
well, Tom, like, you know, his I suppose his rolling of stepping into the priest, like that role, like how did he de-roll? Like how did you manage to get that done? Like, you know, that's a really difficult part of it, but as a drama therapist, you have that ability to help. So maybe you can give us some insight into that.
Well, I will preface by saying that I went in with grand plans and like a very diligent drama therapist with all of my ideas and all of the ways in which I hoped that this would work, and essentially had to throw them out the window because this is a very different setting. This is not the closed therapeutic setting that we get in clinical work. This is a busy film set with a lot of different people playing a lot of different roles, not necessarily those acting.
Yes.
And it just doesn't, it's just not conducive to the way that you would typically move through phases of therapy, which is an excellent reason why at the very beginning, foreseeing some of those challenges, we made it very clear with them that everyone involved had their own therapists outside who would not be joining them on film. And that my role was to be a consultant and that I could guide them in what I knew from the field of drama therapy to bring in the things that hopefully they're working on in therapy separately and combine that with filmmaking and art making and collaboration and what that looks like to get the most out of that and to do it as safely as possible. So that was the most important piece, I think, was making sure that everyone understood I was no one's therapist on set, but that there are so many things that we can pull from drama therapy that can be so useful in this particular setting.
Mm.
So one of those things that I felt very strongly about, obviously, was de-rolling. And I learned very quickly that it wasn't going to look anything like what I've done before, because often I wouldn't be able to have a full group of individuals at the same time at the end of a day of shooting. I wouldn't be able to gather everyone together and have a formal activity. So, and in many ways, well, I will say, I don't want to, I don't want to say that in most ways that ended up being helpful. I would say about half of the time it ended up working in our favor, that people could do things the way it worked best for them individually. And the other half of the time, it probably caused some harm at the time. And this was an excellent learning experience to understand what the limitations are. And I think though often that, you know, how many times per day this is actually what everyone is going through on film sets. And so they at least had a little bit of guidance. So, this isn't anything new that people are stepping into roles that are, incredibly heavy. I think that the reason I think that often this particular setting made things easier is that there's a lot of things inherently built into filmmaking that actually were very helpful in this case, as opposed to perhaps a stage play.
Yeah.
Um, because there are so many starts and stops in filmmaking. And so that gave people the opportunity to breathe and change up the way they were doing things. The fact that much of this was improvised because it was sort of a hybrid documentary fiction piece. That helped a lot too. There was a lot. There were many check-ins, so we had a lot of points where we could stop what was happening and check in and find out how people were feeling in the midst of the action, which was very helpful.
Gorgeous.
When it came to Tom, that was one of the most challenging things I actually encountered throughout the entire process, was those 4 or so days that we spent in the church where Tom was playing a priest. And while it was very heavy for Tom, and he has said that, the most helpful form of shedding that for him was actually leaning on his wife and his family and being able to process at home and being in a different space. He was actually, by the end of that week, almost the least of my concerns. My concern ended up being that the rest of the guys who were involved watching Tom take on the role of priest all week really did something to their brains.
Yeah.
And it became very hard to separate that role from reality. And they began to, have points of contention between them. And, my one actual regret in this process, because most things are truly just outside of my control in filmmaking, and I take it as a way to move forward and pass that along to other people so that they can alter their expectations. But one regret that I do have is that during that week that was the busiest and the most rowdy film setting, I wish that I had spent more time with each person individually early in the week to see some of the signs that things were changing for them mentally watching Tom in that role. Because it was about day 3 when one of them decided to confide in me about the way they were all feeling toward that particular role and that person. And so going into day 4, we didn't have enough time. I learned that at 11 p.m. and by 8 a.m. we were filming again. So by that point, we didn't have time to sort of deconstruct all of those feelings that people were having before filming another scene. And I wish those conversations had happened, even just a day or 2 earlier, so that everyone could make the separation between very real concerns that people had in the real world and what happens to people in psychodramatic settings. And so a lot of those conversations toward the end of that week were about that separation. Let's separate 2 things and let's have a conversation about real world concerns, what's happening here on our set here in Kansas City, in our lives, with our families, with me, with Robert. And then let's have a conversation separately about what I know to be true of psychodrama and what I know that does to our brains, and what I know is healing about that, and what I know is potentially harmful about that, and what we can do with that information. And so I don't think enough de-rolling was done with that particular case. And I think that there were other days of shooting and other scenes where people took my advice about de-rolling and would find one thing that worked for them individually, and they would go do that because I often couldn't be around them. The one person, honestly, who chose to do most of his warm-ups and de-rolling or processing with me was Tarek, who was an actual actor. The child who
phenomenal.
He's wonderful. Most of the guys, it just took them a little time to decide what personally worked for them. And in many cases, it wasn't necessarily working closely with me at the end because they needed some space.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting theme because I had to let go of so much control. I had to let go of my own perception of what processing should look like and what de-rolling should look like, and how people should do it my way, or at least involve me, and I learned very quickly people know what they need, and you have to trust them. And that was what this entire process was about. So it was just as much about that for me as it was for Robert, as it was for everyone else who was sort of playing with this concept of power and control, which is the theme of the movie. So they all use very different tactics to get out of role, but I wouldn't say that all of them were successful every time. Depends how you measure success. But I would say that often we were learning, oh, this is heavier than what I thought it was. There's something here.
Yeah, definitely. Like, just even watching it, I could feel myself projecting onto Tom. Do you know that, like, because he did a great job in his role, in his character. So I can only imagine what the group would be feeling. But it is part of the process, and it's just that trust again, and not knowing, and the murky water, and it's just, yeah, it's just amazing that did happen. Like in any group, really, that group dynamic part would come in. Most of the time there's going to be one person that gets all the negative projections on them in a group. It's going to happen, whether it's like the older lady that could be mom. It could be
Absolutely.
something. So I suppose it's great coming in with your knowledge into this as a consultant and guiding it and shaping it, and then learning, no, I need to let go and not control as much, because they get so much out of that too. And that is the beauty of it, because it's like the possibilities are endless, when you do let go. And yeah, and I'm sure that was felt by them, that you trusted in them. And that was probably part of the healing as well. Do you know? It's
I hope
gorgeous.
so. And
Yeah.
I think that the real healing factor here, greater than any other piece, was the brotherhood that they created with each other, and to an extent with Robert.
Mm.
And being able to just be in the presence of people who have an inside
Mm.
look at what you've been through. It's different for every person, but even in that very first meeting, Ed said, I've never been in a room with this many other survivors before.
Mhm.
And Robert has told me since then that he realized in that moment that if we stopped today and we didn't make this film, like, we still have done something good here because they got to meet each other. And he had that mindset going through the rest of the process. We could end this today, and this was not for nothing. And so I feel that, you know, I also would have liked to have been there more often at the beginning to have a relationship building phase with them.
Mm.
And there were so many constraints keeping me from being there as often as I would like. And that continued because we were also filming. COVID happened while we were filming. So that really threw a wrench in things. And I was eternally grateful when that happened, that we had established at the beginning that this wasn't like a therapist-client relationship,
Yeah.
because unforeseen things happen and you're going to be away from each other for a long period of time. And while that could be true in the making of any film, it was especially true for us during COVID. And so I wish I would have been there at the beginning to build that level of trust, because I feel like it took almost until this phase we're in now for a couple of them to feel that they trust my expertise. They were um, in the case of one or two people involved, they we got along just fine, but I wasn't the healing factor for them, and the drama therapy wasn't necessarily the healing factor for them, but the collaboration and the brotherhood and all of that was, and being heard, which arguably collaboration and being heard are also drama therapy.
Yes.
But for me specifically, not having a bond with every person, then getting into this phase and getting to know each other better and understanding why things work the way that they did. I feel closer to people now than I did necessarily through the process.
Mm.
So and I'm very at peace with that, because I think that there were so many different things that worked for different people, and that has to be the case. You have to realize that it's not a one size fits all situation.
Yeah.
But we needed everyone to come out of that being glad that they did it. That was the thing, they have to come out of this not feeling as if someone has exploited them or their stories, or feeling as though that they wish that they hadn't participated for any reason. And every person came out of this incredibly glad they participated, and saw a lot of positive things in their lives, and they were all different things and for different reasons. And so we view that as the success here. And I think that it's primarily, it all comes down to that concept of not taking any more power away. And what an empowering feeling that the movie just also happened to have success and land on Netflix. And now that's such an interesting phase for everyone to be able to see their stories heard around the world and resonate with people.
Yeah, and I'm here speaking to you from Ireland, and I'm sure a lot of people in America are aware that, in Ireland there are more than, 70 members of the clergy who are convicted of sex abuse. If you go onto bishopaccountability.org, that lists all the names of people in Ireland that are convicted and across the world. But like, it's such a huge topic in Ireland. And, it's like a Pandora's box. We're opening it up every now and again, and then the government decide to close it again. So it's just, I suppose it's a really hot topic in Ireland. And I can imagine, if I go to like the next generation, like let's say my parents, if I got them to watch it, it would be huge for them, because it's just that. It's like, it's showtime. That part in was it Michael Sandridge when he's in role as the priest and he's saying it's showtime. Like, I do think there is that kind of thing with members of the clergy in Ireland, that they did have this godlike facade, So I think that's probably still the case for some people, but I think that way of manipulating people, I suppose it's just worth mentioning that in Ireland it's still quite a big topic, and for it to be accessible for everybody here and to give some healing, even that generational trauma of knowing somebody who was abused, I think it's just going to do so much good, because it's going to get conversation started, and even some reflection, so I just think it's really going to touch so many lives. Yeah, and like, I wrote down some things about, like, it gave them control over their story, gave them power back, gave them options to change it in some way, giving a sense of autonomy for each person as they dramatize their stories. Like, but it does the same kind of to the viewer, because even if there's a case of trauma in their own lives and they're watching it, they can kind of sit back now and almost fantasize about how would they change their story.
Right. I think that it speaks to trauma beyond childhood sex abuse or abuse from clergy, which is also incredibly specific. It's a very different it's a different topic to speak of essentially being abused by an entire system, a system in which these men were viewed as next to God. I keep thinking back to something Ed said in the film about he's the definition of what right is.
Yes.
So, and I don't know who else to ask, and asking God wasn't working. And you think about that and realize the power that is unmatched that clergy have over people practicing that religion. So yeah, I think that those things are all very unique, but also there's a universal story happening underneath this about trauma. And regardless of what kind of trauma you've experienced, this film, I think, opens up the conversation about what this can look like long term, and the opportunity to heal from things even after vast amounts of time, and also speaks to men's mental health, which I think is often neglected. So I think those conversations are equally important and are happening for sure. All of us have gotten a lot of messages from around the world. Some people choose to reach out specifically to me because if they've resonated with some concept of drama therapy that has intrigued them. Other people will reach out to one specific subject who really touched them, and or will reach out to the attorney Rebecca Randalls. Um, so there are different things that really resonate with different people around the world, but an overarching theme there is, I've got this trauma that lives in my body and has for many, many years. And I sort of thought that at this point in my life, there was nothing that was going to kind of reopen that door or engage it in another way or try to process or work through some of these things from the past. And yeah, I think especially a catalyst for those conversations was Joe, who was having nightmares.
Yeah.
Wasn't aware of the abuse or had locked away those memories up until adulthood, when he was experiencing nightmares and a visceral reaction to Sunday mornings, not even going to church. So that story, even in my own family, has made a difference. It's made a difference in the way my own relatives reacted to my own traumas, because they have seen this and seen Joe and understood how trauma can bury deep down and how you might not have a knowledge of it until adulthood. And that's the case for so many people. And that's been the most common thing that I've heard in messages is just this universal story of burying things and not feeling like there was a way to bring those things into the light or ways to work through those until you see some of these men and the bravery that they displayed.
Yeah. And again, it's I suppose I'm coming from the angle of an art therapist, but it's like when we use the creative arts therapies, it almost, it bypasses the mind. It bypasses this brain part that gets so stuck with trauma that it goes into the body. It gives us a way to express, and then it's out, and we can make sense of it or make meaning in it. And even if it doesn't make sense, it's still out. Do you know?
It wasn't doing you any good in. So
yeah, exactly.
Let's try it this way.
Yeah, this is it. So like drama therapy helped these survivors deal with their truths, and I think, you really helped even by like the small details of getting the exact robes. The massive thing obviously was when was Dan Laurine went to the lake, and at the end holding the fishing line, I just thought that was a beautiful moment, even for him to just stand there with the fishing line. Like that's such, I don't know, there's such, yeah, what an image. Like it's just amazing.
These small moments that are pieces of drama therapy, like him being able to see Tarek as his younger self holding that fishing line in that space and take it back and make a whole new memory is these are things that were not my idea. They are very drama therapy, but these are things that came to them because they knew inherently would be healing for them. A lot of people have asked me about the location scouting and whether, what my role was in that part of it, because that ended up being a healing factor for several of them. And I've told people I didn't have anything to do with that at all, because as a drama therapist, generally, I would have probably said that's not a great idea. Just because in drama therapy, we probably would have recreated some of those spaces, and we did in many cases. But in addition to recreating them because that's easier logistically and you don't usually have a film crew backing you, it's also a distancing thing, because if you recreate something that's not quite the same as the original, it can provide a level of distance. And we saw that at work when we had changed that church into a film set, and the guys were chatting about what a difference it makes to see the lights and the cameras, and now this place isn't so scary. And so, coming from a drama therapy perspective, that's probably what I would have said. Let's just recreate everything, then we can have some distance. But that wasn't my call. That, that was something that the guys felt they were ready for and that they could confront head on. And they were right. They were absolutely right that took the power back from those places. And they had the ability, because of this group of people backing them, they had the ability to finally do that and find the exact locations, and in large part due to Dan, because that's what he does for a living as well, and he is very good at location scouting.
Yeah.
But that's just another example of these things that actually do have some basis in why drama therapy also works, but look wildly different in this case, and was still the right choice. And that's because the overarching right choice was to put the power in the hands of the people it belongs to.
Mm-hmm. I'm reminded, like, as you were speaking, like, I do full playback theater. I don't know if you know. Yeah. And there's these forms, and we kind of stick to the form to honor the story, but at the same time sometimes we kind of throw the form out the window if it gives more to the story. So I think it's very similar, isn't it? It's just like,
it is.
Kind of have to be flexible. Do you know? You know that it can't, like you said, like, it can't be a one size fits all kind of thing. Again, like, I'm just,
I think, yeah, coming from theater backgrounds really helps you in positions like this.
Yeah.
And the level of improvisation that has to happen, because we've also trained in improv, and we've trained in playback, and the concept of yes and was also everything.
Yeah.
It's my favorite phrase in the world, that this can be true, and
Yeah.
and that was sort of a running theme as well, that yes, all of these strict notions of what therapy is are important, and this other thing works because this person writes their own story, and this person knows their own soul, and this person knows what they need. And so the difficult thing now becomes that a lot of people, I feel, are wanting to recreate this type of success, or this what they hope is a formula or something, and there wasn't one. And it's very difficult to describe to somebody a formula that might work. But what we can do is share our experiences as much as possible, and describe what things we did pull from this that is more universal. And I'm already running into people around the world who are making films that, as much as I would love to be able to advise throughout the process what they can do to make this a healing environment for their subjects, often by the time we speak, it's the foundation that isn't built on what I know works. Yes. And I know that the foundation here was that power shift, because if you think it's hard for a therapist to give up power and control, imagine how hard it was for the director.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it takes a very special person who can do that. And often when I speak to these people who are entering into the making of a film that is fraught territory like this, the foundation is already concerning, because it's very product over process, as it often has to be. The difference I feel here is that making a good product could be at the forefront, because that is what was incredibly important to these men. Being heard was important. Having this type of success and people resonating with it around the world was important. And that is the why. And if the why is anything else, you're already on shaky ground. So it's very difficult for me to translate this into like a very concise toolkit for other filmmakers, although I'm very much trying.
It's fabulous. Oh, and Monica, like, what's new? Like, what's going on with you right now? Like what do you feel is the next direction you're going into? Are you going to stick with the consulting in this way, or yeah, what's going on?
That's an excellent question. I do intend to remain available for consulting, and I don't know if that will turn into anything or not. I, as I said, I do speak to filmmakers, and there's a possibility that I will sign contracts with one or two of them and do more work in film. And I would like to, now that I have been introduced to the film world, I would like to see what we can do with that. I also I really hope to start collaborating with the people who are already exploring different facets of mental health in the film world and work with them on the toolkits that they're creating to make pieces of it that are dramatherapy specific, because there are a lot of mental health concerns to address in the world of film, and this is just one piece, the concept of de-rolling and the concept of utilizing dramatherapy techniques to make things safer. So I would also like to partner with them, and I've spoken to some people who are doing that work. Right now, I would say my focus is trying to relaunch Heartwork for workshops, because it took such a back burner as I do things like this. And I love things like this. I love that we're still talking about the film. We're still in awards season. We were nominated for a Peabody, and the Emmys haven't come up yet either. So
Very exciting.
yeah, I think that there's when we were shortlisted for an Oscar, and didn't end up getting the final nomination, but most projected that we would. So we were just on pins and needles with that, and a lot of people have asked whether they were all disappointed, whether the subjects were disappointed, or I don't think so, because everyone felt a nomination would have been a win, shortlisting was a win, and something like this that is so hard to watch, being represented in the world in the way that it is and seeing the acclaim that it has is already phenomenal and surprising. And so we feel that we're still in sort of a phase of the process, for lack of a better word, that this is the witnessing phase, right? This is the phase where audiences are witnessing in the same way that people witness dramatherapy sessions. And that feedback makes this process ongoing and makes us feel like we're still in this space. And for me personally, that made it difficult for me to focus on these wellness workshops while speaking about Procession so often. But I love that piece as well. So I want all of these things to converge. I want to get back into doing a lot of arts-based workshops, and I'm hoping to mostly work at retreats throughout the summer, outdoor retreats doing workshops. And I will continue to take speaking engagements related to the movie. We're going to Robert and I are going to be co-presenting at the North American Dramatherapy Association conference in November in San Diego about the movie.
Gorgeous.
So I'm really glad to primarily be making these connections in the creative arts therapy world. It's wonderful to collaborate with people from that world about how we can enter the filmmaking space and what that collaboration looks like, and how this is perhaps something new. It isn't solely filmmaking, it isn't solely dramatherapy, but there is a marriage of those two things that can be really beautiful. So I have been so grateful to have this well received by the creative arts therapy world and have so many opportunities to speak to young therapists about the potential and the settings that they may have not thought of working in before.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing. I think for, anyone in Ireland that's listening, a few of us might be thinking of someone like the director Jim Sheridan, and I don't know if you've ever come across him. He'd be the only person I can think of in Ireland who would be close to Robert. Really more of a storyteller and honoring the story. Yeah. But yeah, this is just so exciting, and thank you for opening this space and for having this conversation with me. And yeah, I really am so grateful for putting drama therapy on the map on Netflix. Like, it's just gorgeous.
That's certainly not ever, it was never in my list of goals or something that I thought was on the horizon, but I'm so grateful for that opportunity and just honestly in awe of the entire situation, and didn't expect to be pioneering something necessarily, but that's generally the way that it's viewed. And I think that that's such an amazing opportunity going forward, that, you know, we can learn from my mistakes and we can learn from the successes of everyone involved, and just forge on and continue to try new things and open up these conversation between fields, which I think is now the thing I'm most passionate about.
Oh,
thank you so much, by the way. It's been so wonderful to be able to chat with you. And
thank you. You just ooze passion, and you know, it's just gorgeous to see you really care, like, you know, so it's just gorgeous. Thank you. And you know, I work in a place called Soearth Projects. We're hoping to screen the movie there, and I think I'll hold on to this podcast until that kind of week, and kind of launch the two of them together to really get a conversation started after the screening with creative arts therapists. So I'll keep in touch about that as well, because you know, it'd be really lovely to see how they found it as well.
I would love to hear their insights after a screening. I love those conversations, and I love to hear from audience members, and yeah, it's all very interesting.
Thank you so much. I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. It's like about 4 p.m. here, so you've got the whole morning for your.
It's only 10 a.m. I will get on. I'm actually going to have a meeting with Robert Greene so that we can start planning the presentation for San Diego. So
gorgeous. Okay, well, enjoy and take it easy, and I'll be in touch again soon.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.